I just moved into a new neighborhood, my dream suburban home, with a large yard for my two young kids to run around in. The house was everything I had imagined. It was in a friendly, family-oriented community, the kind where kids played outside and neighbors waved as they mowed their lawns. Everything seemed perfect. I had visions of BBQs on summer weekends, birthday parties, and my kids enjoying the backyard to the fullest. One of the first things I did after moving in was set up a swing set for my kids. It wasn't a massive one, just a simple wooden swing set with a slide and a few swings, the kind you see in most backyards. I figured it was the perfect addition to our new home. It would give my kids a place to burn off some energy, and it would fit right into the family-friendly atmosphere of the neighborhood. I made sure the swing set was placed well away from the fence, clear of any obstacles, and in a spot where the kids could play safely. I even double-checked the guidelines in the neighborhood handbook to make sure I wasn't violating any HOA rules. The instructions said nothing about swing sets being prohibited, so I figured it was fine. No big deal. I wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. My kids loved it right away. They spent hours each day swinging, sliding, and playing on their new playset. It felt like everything was falling into place. But little did I know, not everyone in the neighborhood was as happy with the swing set as my kids were. The next few days felt like a blur of anxiety and frustration. I couldn't shake the conversation with Karen from my mind. How could something so innocent, a swing set for my kids, become such a big issue? I had done everything I thought was right, but here I was, facing a threat of fines from the HOA. I couldn't let that happen. I wasn't just going to let Karen dictate what I could and couldn't do in my own yard. The next morning, I went straight to my computer and dug through the HOA rules again. I combed through the entire document, highlighting anything that mentioned modifications to the property or structures like fences, sheds, or swing sets. There, it was nothing about swing sets. Not one word. I took a deep breath. This wasn't over. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Karen had been so certain of herself. She didn't even seem to question whether the swing set was an actual violation. She just assumed it was, and that was enough for her. I wasn't going to back down without a fight. If she thought she could push me around, she was sorely mistaken. I decided to call the HOA office. I figured the best way to handle this was to speak directly with someone in charge. Someone who could look at the situation objectively and see that I wasn't in violation of any rules. I wasn't trying to make trouble. I just wanted to enjoy my new home with my kids. The phone rang a few times before someone picked up. "Hello, this is Linda at the HOA office. How can I help you?" "Hi, Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm your name, and I'm calling about a complaint I've received regarding the swing set I put up in my backyard. I've already looked through the HOA guidelines, and I don't see anything about needing approval for something like that. Can you help clarify?" The days after I submitted my appeal felt long and nerve-wracking. I spent my time anxiously waiting for the HOA to schedule the review, but every knock at the door, every email I received made my heart skip a beat. I was constantly on edge, wondering if today would be the day Karen would show up again, or if the HOA would side with her and force me to take down the swing set. The uncertainty weighed heavily on me, but there was no way I was backing down. I had already fought so hard for this, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Karen, take away the joy my kids got from their swing set. I had done everything right, followed all the rules, and was prepared to fight for what was mine. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I received the email from the HOA, Notice of Appeal Review. I opened it immediately, practically holding my breath as I read the contents. It was scheduled for the following week. I'd have to present my case to the HOA board, and Karen would be there, likely ready to argue against me once again. I couldn't help but feel a surge of anxiety, but at the same time, there was a part of me that felt a little relief. This was my chance to put an end to this. The night before the hearing, I stayed up late, reviewing my appeal and gathering all my evidence one last time. I had photos of the swing set, a list of neighbors who supported it, and a detailed explanation of how the swing set complied with every rule in the HOA guidelines. I was as prepared as I could be. The next day, I walked into the HOA office, feeling a little nervous but determined. The atmosphere in the room was formal, and the board members were already seated, their attention focused on the papers in front of them. I recognized a few of them from previous neighborhood meetings, and they didn't seem particularly friendly. Karen was sitting across the room, her arms crossed, wearing that same stern expression she had the first time we spoke. She didn't look at me as I walked in, but I could feel the tension in the air. It was like we were two opponents facing off in a courtroom, and I wasn't going to let her win. The meeting began with a formal introduction from the HOA board. The board members took turns stating the purpose of the meeting, which was to review the appeal I had submitted and determine whether the swing set was in violation of the HOA's guidelines. Karen spoke first, of course. She stood up and, without hesitation, began her case. I'm sure many of you know that the swing set in your name's yard is a safety hazard and a violation of our community guidelines, Karen said, her voice dripping with confidence. It doesn't fit the aesthetic of the neighborhood, and I've already received complaints from multiple neighbors about the height and placement of the structure. I could feel my blood boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. When it was my turn, I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked up to the table where I had laid out my documents. I looked at each of the board members before I began. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, I said, trying to sound confident. I'd like to start by saying that I understand the HOA's role in maintaining